You're listening to the Reinvest Podcast, where each Tuesday we show business owners and entrepreneurs how to diversify into real estate by equipping you with the tools and tactics to build generational wealth. Your hosts, Garrett Gatton and Seth Ciminillo. Hey guys, welcome to the Reinvest Podcast, episode 126. We've got an oldie but a goodie back with us, our real estate dad, unofficially, Ross McArthur. Ross, before we get in too much to what's happened since we last spoke with you, on a personal note, Seth, you have a marathon coming up.
Got a marathon coming up, so this will get released a few days before I run my marathon. So after you listen to this, just think of me because I'll be in pain running 26.2 miles or whatever it is. I'm going to run it, though. My goal is a little ambitious. It's 9:30 a mile for my pace. But after running this last weekend, I'm like, I need to prepare mentally for it to be 9:45 a mile. I just feel like but maybe I'll feel really good that day. And maybe the weather will be great and the stars will align. So that's what I'm hoping on.
One of the things I wrote down in reference to talk about this is ego check.
My ego got checked when I ran last weekend.
Well, I'm saying you're going to have to check your ego. When I ran a marathon in Cleveland in 2018, hundreds of people, you're excited race day, you have ambitions of what you think is going to happen, and you've got your thing, 9:30, 9 minutes, whatever it is in your mile split. And then just know that there are old ladies, young girls, and lots of other people who you would think in your brain you would be faster than that will run faster than you. So just be prepared for that.
Yeah.
So that should be fun.
It'll be humbling.
Yeah, and that's good. But zooming out a little bit, this is something that is kind of a goal.
Yeah, it's
that
a
ties
bit
into
goal.
some of the journey you've been on health-wise, right?
Yep. And for anybody out there that's like, oh my gosh, a marathon. About 18 months ago, I couldn't even run like a full mile without stopping. So you can do it. Just takes some hard work. So I encourage you guys, if you guys have goals like that, triathlons, marathons, bikeathons, if those are a thing, you go out there and you just do it. You train for it. It's more about consistency than it is intensity. So if you're consistent over the next year and a half, you're going to be able to do it.
That's good. And one of the things about the Reinvest podcast is it's not just reinvesting because it's real estate investing, but we're talking about reinvesting into your life, reinvesting into your relationships, to your habits, to yourself, to your
family,
finances, your marriage. Because at the end of the day, quality of life is one of the massive things that everybody's after when they're investing. So I think it's a great segue actually to bring Ross into this conversation. How are you? Give us a quick update. And
first, let's, Seth's story. I just heard it before we got on. One, we were like 30 minutes late starting this podcast because we haven't talked in a while, so we were catching up on life. And I heard about Seth's journey, and it's pretty incredible, by the way. And to put into context, so I ran 3 or 4 half marathons, again, half, and I did it in like 11-minute miles. So you're gonna kill it.
Yeah, thank you. I can
not semi-fit. Like I was like, wow, all right, that's 9 something miles. I'm like, shame on me, I guess.
Will Smith,
very, very cool, very good. Best of luck too.
Yeah,
Will
thank
Smith,
you.
The actor.
I've heard of him. Before he got defamed because he slapped somebody.
Before he smacked somebody on live television. His ethos is running.
Really?
Because it's just hard. He's like, if you want to do something hard, be someone that runs because it's never going to be easy. It'll always be like just one of those things that kind of checks you. So very practical. We're just dropping out gold nuggets before we've even gotten into this today. So, but Ross, give us a little update on your company, and then we'll jump into some good stuff about how people are losing money in real estate and they don't even know it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I was on episode 56. I was trying to look up the date on that just for context, but I think it's been well over a year. So we were just kind of talking about our businesses before this, and man, things happen a lot. Things in the market happen, things in our lives happen, different focuses, different ways to scale. But so we've continued to double down on multifamily. We're kind of a boutique group investing company. That's what I've called ourselves now. It's friends and family, and we've crept up close to with my personal portfolio and our syndicated friends and family portfolio under Follow the Deal, about 800 units now. So pretty sizable. About 18 months ago, we started and been very pleased with our own property management company called Thrive Property Group. So operationally, which we'll get into, which is funny, great topic. We've been very, very focused on that. We did about 5 deals since our last time we talked, all variable sizes. And so we bought about 175 units in 2024. Not that unit count matters per se, but just to give everyone a little bit of scale. And really going forward this year, it's a lot of the same. So we'd like to disposition a couple properties. We did that last year, but we'd like to acquire, a few hundred units and creep right around that 1,000 mark. I feel like that's just a really good number for us operationally and for our investor group. We're never going to be the guy who owns 10,000 units, nor do I really want to, if I'm being honest with you. But we feel like that's a really, really good avenue for us for long-term stability. And then actually, since we talked, we've also bought 2 water parks.
I was kind of curious about that.
Yeah, that's an episode probably on its own. But so we acquired Diggerland, which is we joke it's a terrible name, but it makes sense if you look it up. It's in New Jersey. It's kind of the hands-on construction family fun center water park. So there's like a little amusement rides and a water park, and then we also acquired Water Safari, which is New York's largest water park. If you've ever been in that area or grew up in that area, you've been there. So when we announced that we were acquiring that property, we had tons of people reach out and said every summer I'd go there. So pretty cool, totally different than multifamily, totally different business model. But again, we all preach diversification. So we're 90%, multifamily real estate as a whole, and 10% in the water parks.
Well, I'm pretty certain your business partner in the water park thing has scheduled with us, so I'm excited to kind of dig into that strategy and how he even got into water parks.
Yeah, that's going to be just a fascinating one.
Really different than what we.
Yeah, it'll be but you know what? He's one of the smart. His name's James Harai, and again, I think you guys have him coming up, but James is just probably one of the smartest, just blocking and tackling entrepreneurs I've ever met.
Wow.
And so he has a ton of value to me and to Stan, who you guys just had on recently. Like, we all have different strengths. And if it wasn't for James, we probably wouldn't have started our own property management company. But he was the catalyst to kind of understand how to start a business, hire people, scale it. And so that'll be a really good episode, not to delay what we're talking about today. So couldn't be more excited to be back with you guys. I don't do a lot of re-guest spots, go back on, but I'm a big fan, as you guys call me real estate dad, but I'm a big supporter of you guys as humans. I think you have a really good platform, and as host, for any guest who's ever done this, the host is everything when it comes to this. And if you have a host that you don't really jive with, it's not very fun to do. So everyone who's listening, I think probably enjoys you guys as host, and I know we enjoy being guests here. So I appreciate it.
We're going to give all credit to careers in a prior life in youth ministry. So God, I'm sure it helped somehow.
It prepped us.
Yeah.
So one of the topics that we wanted to hone in on today, and with you guys starting your own property management company, I think there's going to be a lot of firsthand experience in some of our discussion. And it's the biggest ways that you're losing money, specifically in the operational aspect of real estate, right? That is the most time-intensive, labor-intensive, detail-oriented aspect of real estate. And everybody gets excited to underwrite a deal. And so much of the energy and the focus, even when you're looking to get into real estate and you're watching stuff on YouTube and different things, that's the sexy part. Then you buy this thing and you're like, holy crap, what did I just do? Where do I go from here? Because now you have a pro forma, and really it's the execution that is going to dictate whether you were right or wrong on your assumptions on the front end.
Well, and the hard part is right, wrong, or indifferent. If you cannot operate efficiently, if you cannot nail down operations for your real estate portfolio, it doesn't matter how good of a deal you buy, you're gonna ruin it. So you're gonna turn it into a crappy deal. You're gonna lose out on a lot of returns for your investors. And it's not, even because if you bought an okay deal and you had an excellent operation and a great operator, and they could maximize that property, you can save that deal, but it just doesn't work the other way around. So, dude, operations is where it's at.
If you ever, a great book, if you're listening to this, Creativity Inc., Ed Catmull, he was the CEO of Pixar, and they talk about this. They say you can give a great idea to a poor team, and it will flop. You could give a crappy idea to a great team, and it will do very well. And that's really the summary of what you're saying. So we've got five of the biggest ways that people are losing money in the operational side. And number one is poor property management. Talk to us a little bit about some things like the cost of a bad tenant, things that maybe people don't think of, how vetting on the front end, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yeah, and so why we have our own property management company is exactly this. So for us to scale and be profitable and produce a high level of return for ourselves and our investors, this is like the crux of all things. Like you said, the sexy part's actually buying the deal. Like honestly, that's the part that gets me excited too. Like I'm like, yeah, we got one, woo! And then it's like, all right, the real work comes after you buy it.
Yep.
So property management, there are some good third-party ones. So don't let me, just because we started one, that doesn't mean that's what you should do. I'm just saying you have to have a good one in your corner, whether you're your own or third party. So within this, there's probably 100 different things we could talk about. I'm going to kind of work my way. We had a small list on the side that we were all talking through before this. I am going to start with dedicated focus because I think this is really important. So how do people charge? A lot of times it's a percentage of income, right? 10%, especially small multifamily, 10% flat or something like this. But the problem is, depending on the size of the asset, you're paying a lot of money for just a very small portion of dedicated time. Right. So if you're a small operator and you have a single family house, let's be honest with you, that probably makes sense. Like it doesn't need a ton of time. You're paying a little bit, you're getting a little bit. That makes sense. But when you start to scale, you're literally paying maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars in payroll or management fees, but you're really only getting maybe $50,000 of a human's effort. And what I mean by that is 40 hours a week. Because if you went out and hired somebody, you're going to pay them X amount of dollars. You're going to get 100% of their attention, right? Or their dedicated weekly work attention. So that is the number one thing. No matter what you're paying for, do the math on that, and you have to get the juice worth the squeeze of what type of admin or management fee you're paying versus the human hours you're getting. Because if you're not getting the dedication, you're paying a lot, but not actually getting the execution you need. So I'm going to kind of pause there. I said kind of a lot on that one, but that is a big part of it.
Yeah, just maybe to kind of finish on that, for somebody who's looking or interviewing a property management company, what are the questions that they could ask preventatively or on the front end to get a pulse on how dedicated that property management company is going to be on their portfolio?
Yeah, so who's going to manage it? How many properties do they manage? I think that is the basic 101 without getting too much in the weeds of size of portfolios and things like that. Like X person, what's their skill set and how many properties are they managing? And what's the distance of those properties? Because that also may matter, right? If they manage 100 units and they're all within 10 minutes of each other, like that's pretty easy to do. But if you manage 150 units and they're an hour apart from each other, 50, 50, and 50 as an example, like their bandwidth is going to be less because of drive time. But that simple question will give you a lot of information.
That's good. That's good. Let's talk about the cost of a bad tenant. I think a lot of people go to a property management company maybe because they don't have the vetting processes in place.
They expect the property management company to be able to put in a good tenant,
which isn't necessarily an assumption that should be made. But what are the aspects of the cost of a bad tenant that you don't see?
Yeah, so I think there's two different ways to qualify a bad tenant. There could be a bad tenant that pays and pays on time, but they're disruptive, they're nasty, they're dirty, they cause infestations due to the way they live. So there's a cost associated with having a bad tenant in the unit. So example, like, if you kicked them out, or you had that tenant, you're going to have bed bugs or cockroaches or nasty things, and those eventually could go to other people's units, right? So even though they pay on time, at the end of the day, they're causing a disruption in that unit. And that disruption then can go across to other units. I use the infestation one, but loud, smokes in their unit when they shouldn't be smoking in their unit, doing things that just aren't neighborly, that is going to create turn in every unit that surrounds them. So it's not just that particular unit itself, it's the impact they have on other people. And those costs are really hard to define. Let's just be honest. It's really hard to do that 6 degrees of separation. However, it's real. It's very real. And then there's the other side of it where they're actually an okay human. We'll just say it that way. Like they're semi-clean, but they're late and they're never going to be caught up. And too many property management companies kick that down the road. because they're hoping that they'll get some assistance. They're hoping that somebody will come in. And what many times you see is it's not going to happen, or if it does, it happens for a short period and they're back in that cycle. And so you're spending a lot of time on a tenant, to be honest with you, that you just need to rip the Band-Aid off and move on from. Get somebody in there at market rate, get somebody in there that's your tenant particularly, that you vetted, and that's going to be there a long time. So there's two different things. I mean, there's kind of like the disruption, and then there's hanging on to a tenant that's a bad payer, and that ripple effect it has on you financially, whether now or in the future.
One of the things you said here is fail quickly and then replace.
Yeah.
And, if you're going to quit fast, right? Fire quick.
Ironically, you think that you're probably saving money by trying to retain that tenant so you don't have a turnover or you don't have vacancy.
Yes.
But to your point, it could potentially cause more vacancy around that, just depending on what the situation is. And that is hard to quantify. That is hard to, and it's hard to project for. So it's better to cut off what you know than hope that it's not as bad as what you don't know. So.
And I'll say this too, if you're listening, because of how technology has opened up resources for you as a landlord, there's no reason you can't have a background check that a tenant pays for. Even Zillow, I think, they make it easy to where they can provide a background check that they had done through Zillow and recirculate that if you use them to market your stuff. So there's just no reason you shouldn't be doing that. And that's going to be a huge...
Yeah, background check. I mean, that should just be the bare minimum. Like, if you're not going to do anything else or have them fill out anything custom for your property, I mean, that should be the bare minimum.
So let's go to number 2, weak asset management. Maybe really quickly distinguish property management and asset management, and then we can jump into the particulars.
Yeah, and again, we're kind of hitting the 20,000 foot view of a lot of this stuff. So when we talk about property management, that's I would say kind of everything from leasing to financials at the end, right? That's kind of managing the aspect of the property. But asset management is kind of the condition and the strategy of the property. So that could be ensuring that we have a strategy up front for market rates and things like that. We could have a strategy as far as renovation and the type of renovation or capital improvements, all proactive and reactive maintenance. All that falls under asset management. So essentially the business and execution plan for the property, I kind of classify as asset management. And so there's so many things under that, but there's one that most people are involved in, and it's value add, right? Forced appreciation or value add. And there's a million different things that we kind of step over dollars to pick up pennies on that we're missing opportunities in. So it's a very simple one, right? So storage rentals, as an example, like that's a really, really big one. So if there's any storage properties, like, you can charge for those, parking, converting offices into actual units. Because a lot of these properties may be smaller and they don't really need an office. Well, convert that either into storage or into an actual unit that you can rent. And then there's things like RUBS, utilities is a great example. Like I classify that kind of as an asset management task, where you're moving a property from owner paid utilities to like a utility bill back program. So anything that you can really do to take lessen expenses and add to the income column is going to boost value. And there's just so many little opportunities that we think these big projects, we miss kind of the simple ones.
Yeah. One of the things that we had on your list, just in that vein, was maybe adding washer and dryer installs. Have you guys, what have you guys seen for something like that? Because that's like really practical. There's a lot of older, maybe multifamily units that would maybe just have a common area laundry or something like that. What have you seen as far as what does that do to the rents with the kind of properties in the area that you're in, and what does it cost to add something like that in a unit?
Yeah, so I think that's really property by property and market by market. I know I have some friends in the industry, some people that you guys know too, that kind of went through that process. We haven't yet. We've never went in yet and said, all right, let's add washer and dryers, because we haven't felt like the juice was worth the squeeze, not to use that term again, but how much more are we going to really get? However, in places like Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Louisville, metro markets, nicer vintage, things like that, I think that becomes a real thing. From the little bit of case study I saw from somebody who did this, they were getting about $75 to $100 premium and the cost to convert it was between $3,000 and $5,000, I think, to add washer and dryer. But a lot of that's going to be dependent on obviously the setup you're currently going to, right?
Yeah, because I'm in the process of buying a duplex right now, and one of the negotiation items with the owner was that he would add a washer dryer hookup in one of the units. It being a duplex, there's a basement underneath. The conversion for that's going to be just a couple $100, and it might have in our area in the location the property's in maybe a $25 to $35 difference on rent. But preemptively though, it's something I was saying as a stipulation to buy it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's huge. Another one on this that's not on this list that's a good one is having a fiber optic line brought into your property, and you pay the internet company one overall monthly fee, and then they give you so many hookups that you can provide to tenants. And so we're doing this in a property in Lima. We bring a fiber optic cable in. Let's say we pay $250 a month, and now we're charging these 30 tenants $40 a month, less than what they're going to get from Spectrum or the local internet provider. But now it's actually a $600 to $800 profit center for us for that property. So if you have a multi-unit property, that is something to look into as well. And when
we looked at Starlink too. We haven't pulled the trigger on that, but we did the kind of a little bit of analysis a couple months ago on that. So I think that's going to become more and more popular thing because the cost of doing that has gone down, but the cost to the end user, your tenant, has continued to go up. So it's a nice way that margin there is your profit, right?
Well, I just to bring this back, we're saying ways you're losing money in real estate, and you say, well, if you're leaving income streams, they're on the table, then you're losing money, A, in the cash flow of it, and then B, in your NOI and the sale price of your property.
Yeah.
So there's two markers there.
Yeah, face value, maybe people that aren't doing this all the time, they're just looking at the lost cash flow. But really, yeah, it's if you go to sell this, you're going to need that boosted NOI. So you're leaving money on the table.
Let's go to number 3, other ways. This is the third way that people are losing money in the operational side. And this is a big one: maintenance, turnovers, project management. And it's understandable once we kind of dive into this why so much money is left on the table or lost through this process. But what are some points here, and what's been your guys' experience on this?
Yeah, so we'll talk about an overarching theme that we see a lot when we're buying multifamily, especially mom and pop owners, is deferred maintenance. So deferred maintenance can be little things that turn big, right? And I think that's where people lose money the most. It can be things like roofs that we're trying to get every second, especially with insurance and claims and just the cost of materials, all this stuff going on right now. Roofs is a big subject. And so we're probably trying to push that down the road as much as we can. And next thing you know, bad storm, Ohio, Indiana, we're getting these wicked windstorms, we're getting tornadoes coming through. That roof goes, all of a sudden goes from, being okay to now ripping up a bunch of it. And now you have leaks in the inside. And because the roof wasn't strong enough to maintain that from the wind or the hail or whatever the issue was, now you're having all kinds of issues. The decking's getting wet, the unit's getting wet, you might have a displaced tenant. I mean, these things ripple. Another one that we've seen a lot is like sewer lines, not jetting sewer lines. We got murdered on sewer backups this last year, and we learned a lesson too, proactive. So now we're all of a sudden going to have every sewer line jetted once a year. Doesn't cost very much to do, but the backup is outrageous. You're paying thousands of dollars plus. It's probably going to back up, as nasty as that is, into a tenant's unit. So then you have restoration and things like that. So those are two, like roofs, sewage, anything that essentially is going to deteriorate and almost create like a little nuclear explosion of bigger issues.
And there's a really developing point here that's more relevant today than it was 2 years ago. And it's letting deferred maintenance items potentially compromise your insurance on the property. Insurance companies are auditing so hard right now on the policies they have on commercial real estate properties, even residential, and they're getting stringent and starting to scrupulate on condition items that would give them an out to not reinsure a policy or not to insure it for the first time. And that's a bad day if you have a multi-million-dollar property and your insurance says you either fix a $100,000 roof or we won't insure your policy. You know what I'm saying? So the insurance aspect is a massive developing thing. We sat down with a roofing company that's selling kind of a maintenance program to help homeowners and investors preemptively maintenance their roofs on their properties. And in that conversation, they were sharing with us how insurance companies are pulling back from replacement cost for roofs, and they're doing cash value, which is usually going to be like a third, maybe a half of what it's going to cost for you to re-roof a property. And there's just going to be a lot of things to pay attention to for insurance moving forward. But
yeah, I think you guys will probably have an insurance dedicated person one of these days probably come on if you haven't already, because I think 2025, that topic is very relevant and what we're all battling. Insurance used to be $250 a unit. Now it's $500 to $750 dollars per unit. That just happened in the last 3 to 5 years. I mean, we're talking 3x. And so that's one cost you can't really do much about besides shop it and try to make sure you're getting the best bang for the buck. To bring us back to maintenance terms, there was a couple other bullet points I just want to touch on because I do think it's incredibly important. We talked about this on a previous episode about knowing what things cost. And you don't have to be an expert, but you do have to at least understand that windows to replace them around $500, right? You have to start to learn what basic things cost for projects, because most contractors are going to, I'm going to say, overinflate their price just a little bit. For a lot of different reasons. And there's usually about a 10% margin that, it may be even more, that you can go back on a $30,000 project, you can probably get for 25 or 27. You know, there's always a buffer in there. So finding a fair rate for the work is so crucial, because on one single family property, it matters, right? But if you're running a 800 unit portfolio and spending millions of dollars on repairs and maintenance and renovation and CapEx every year, 10 to 20% is hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And when you talk about people doing capital calls out there right now and some deals in trouble and things like that, a couple $100,000 is the difference between giving a great return and no return sometimes. And so that is probably one of the biggest, most important things, sourcing product and finding good labor, because that is the biggest part of your budget on your income statement is maintenance, turns, CapEx.
Are you guys doing anything creative in sourcing your materials? I mean, are you just doing the big box stores and trying to buy bulk at Lowe's and Menards and Home Depot, or what are you guys doing?
We've done two main things, and almost a third, but one is pretty simple. Like, we work with a commodities company that specializes in anything like home related, and they do truckload programs. And so we buy flooring for generally less than $1 a square foot for 20 mil LVP flooring, but we have to buy a truckload of it, right? So we're buying 22,000 square feet at a time. But that same floor, if you went to like a Home Depot or a Floor and Decor or something like that, that quality of floor is between $3 and $4 a square foot. So we're able to go and put LVP in for a very economical cost. We have gone to a pure flooring company to install that because they're super efficient, right? They're in and out, and so the install price is low. So we're able to really cut cost on that, because what's the number one thing you do during a turn? It's flooring and paint. So that's been a big one. We have partnered with Home Depot, and we're, called the national account or whatever you want to call it. So when we do bigger orders, we can submit those and they bid them. And we usually see anywhere from a 15 to 20% discount. Plus, we get 20% off paint and things like that as well. So we've done that. And the third one is a little bit newer for us, is anytime it's a bigger project, like a true, like we're going to do 60 windows, we found a really, really good construction company that does $100 million a year. I mean, we're talking big construction company, and they've now taken over any of our bigger projects versus us trying to find like a smaller company, and they go in and they source product. Like, that is a big part of what they do. And so that's helped us. So between those three categories, we've worked on this a lot. Labor is probably the fourth. We're still trying to work through to find the right type of labor, whether third party or ourselves. But this is probably 20% of somebody's budget every year for a property at least.
And that just, the point there, if you're listening, is the more scale you can provide, the more discount you can find on some of the materials and labor cost.
Yeah, it sounds like I need some flooring like that. I just don't know how to do with 22,000 square feet right now.
I'll take I got 1,000 square feet I could probably use from you.
Find a warehouse. You guys know everybody locally. Find a warehouse, throw it in there.
That's right.
Yeah, right.
All right, number 4. Let's click through these last two, because we can get in some smaller pocket segment, which I'm excited to get into. So number 4 is bad debt or poor capital structure. I thought this was an interesting one. Let's talk about whether it's high interest loans, balloon payments, over leveraging. What are some things that you've seen?
Yeah, so this is so I'm the big fan of creative financing, however that may be done, and so trying to get as high lever as you can within reason. So take that with a grain of salt as I go through these, but high interest loans. So a good example of this is probably not like your traditional bank debt, right? If you're going and getting 6.75, 25-year AM, like that's just normal debt today. But I'm talking about like bridge debt, or I'm talking private money debt where you're in the 10% and you're thinking you're only going to use it for a little bit of time and things go awry, right? And now that debt is pushing you, which we'll talk about in number 5 for our next topic, but it's pushing you in the corner that you can't get out of. And so a lot of people aren't as honest with their business plan and their exit strategies as they should be, and they get backed into a corner. So those high interest loans, like we use a loan for flipping a lot of times. He's become a good friend, but it's 16% interest, right? It's a high, no questions asked. It's 100% on the property we're buying. We just bring renovation costs. So it's really high debt, but I'm only going to be in it for 3 to 4 months. So it's an operational cost to doing a deal.
Yeah.
But what people don't realize is then they treat things like a hobby, and now they have that 16% debt for 18 months. And that's where you're going to get killed. So you get backed into a corner without the right exit strategies. Balloon payments are real. So that's number 2 on this list that we kind of threw in as a opportunity where people kind of lose their shirts is, we have a lot of balloon payments, especially when you do some creative financing stuff. You may have a second mortgage with a balloon payment. If you don't structure that right with maybe an option to extend, if anybody's doing any type of creative financing or where you can control the type of balloon payment, always put an option to extend. Always 1 year, because you just never know what's going to happen. So
because what you can't control is the macro level economics of what's going on around you in the lending environment.
Yes. Yeah. So that's a big deal with that extra option. And then, we talk about over leveraging. Again, I'm a fan of leverage, but there is such thing as truly over leveraging. So, and I think that stems from buying bad to begin with. If you have a really high cost basis and then you over leverage, it's going to be really hard for you to cash flow get out of that property. So those are kind of 3 categories. We probably don't have time to go deeper than that, of course, but I don't know if there's anything you guys want to add to them.
The only thing I want to touch on the balloon payment side of things is whenever you're making a decision on financing, it's at the front end of an acquisition. And you oftentimes won't feel the effect of that decision, like a balloon payment, until 3 or 5 years into the hold of that real estate. And so you're making decisions on the front end. And if you're, to your point, not honest with yourself about your business plan, you have created this ticking time bomb. And even if you can refinance, if you weren't realistic with what your assumptions were or what your options were to refinance, you might be able to find another product, but now maybe your cash flow is 33% less than what it was because of the increased debt service.
Well, and here's a practical example on that point. We did a deal locally, and it was a seller finance deal, and the initial term for that is 3 years. And but we had negotiated at least a 2-year, an option to extend for 2 years, and it's expensive, but it just gives you that wiggle room of if 3 years comes up, we're over a year into that deal now. If the next 2 years goes by and we're in a terrible market environment for lending, we at least have that little bit of wiggle room. Even though it's going to cost us an arm and a leg, it's going to be better than the alternative of having to sell the property, early in a sense when it's a bad time to sell. So it just gives you options, and it really protects you and your investors.
For sure.
Number 5, emotional decision making, and I think one of these things is part of emotion is when you're getting antsy because you're not getting any deals done, right? And there's a couple of things that play into the emotional side of investing, but what do you mean here?
Yeah, so the forcing bad deals, I think, is trying to keep up with is it Jeffersons. Is that what
Keeping up with the Jones.
The Joneses.
Yeah, the Joneses.
Jonesing on me right now.
But you do. And this world of like social media. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm on all of it too. Well, especially LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. But you see these things, and it's just all portrayed in the best light. And next thing you know, you get this FOMO, fear of missing out, right? Like, oh man, like I'm not gonna lie, Lee Yoder, friend of ours, friend of your guys's, like he just closed on a big 400 and something unit portfolio. Like I'm like, well, what have I done with it, right?
Yeah.
Next thing you know, I'm like, hey, can I go find a 400 unit? No, but you guys get the point. Is you see these friends of yours, or even just peers in anything, work, W-2 job, corporate America, or as a business owner, and you start to make poor decisions or second guessing your niche that you're doing,
right?
And you start to go out of your wheelhouse. And I've almost done it 3 or 4 times. I have done it once, and then I almost did it 3 or 4 other times, and I have to rein myself back in, but. That when you start feeling like, almost like pity for yourself when it comes to, especially like deals, hunting deals and things like that, just know if you act on it, you're going to regret it 2 years from now. It's going to be one of the worst decisions you make.
This doesn't apply to Lee because he's awesome and he knows what he's doing. But oftentimes the people that you're comparing yourself to on social media, when something goes bad, they get quiet and you just don't hear from them again. And you're still out there acting on your, like you let their poor decisions that you didn't know at the time influence you to make poor decisions. And then you just don't hear from them again. And you're still there operating on poor advice or,
Yeah, and we're still waiting to see what the fallout is going to be this year next from everyone that made poor decisions in the last couple of years buying deals. So, right. I mean, we're still kind of seeing some of those foreclosures happen, and you hear about operators that are losing their deals or underwater in their deals right now, just trying to hang on for dear life to see if things kind of reset on the market. And we just can't see that from the outside looking in. Right. And so you get that fear of missing out, or you think, oh, the grass is greener over there, but they're losing their hair because they're so stressed out about their deal.
Warren Buffett, you read his book. What did he say about that? You were telling me something the other day about just being disciplined as an investor.
Yeah, one of his things, I read the book, The Warren Buffett Way, and so he didn't write it, but I was all about him. And just one of his major things that Warren Buffett adheres to is just the difference between a good and a bad investor largely is the ability to be emotionally controlled in your investing. And, he's kind of relating it to buying businesses and investing in the stock market, but it's really the same it's an investing principle in general. Mm-hmm. If you can ride the waves, ride the ups and the downs, and, you're not making emotional decisions, but you can look at the numbers and just act accordingly. He's like, that's kind of one of the big differentiators between a good investor and a bad investor. Yeah. It's having the emotional discipline to, even when things are good, not to flip out and maybe sell and just think you made all this money, but same thing when things are bad, not to lose your shirt. So
that's good.
Yeah, I would say business and sales and investing, all those kind of human-oriented tasks that we have in our lifetime, whether professional or personal, life is the biggest highs and the biggest lows. Some days you're on cloud 9, some days you're 6 feet under. And I had the same thing. It wasn't Warren Buffett, but I had a mentor that just said the better you can split the difference and just be even, it just your emotional intelligence goes through the roof.
Yeah. All right, we're going to jump into our smaller pocket story here. So Ross, go ahead and tell us about a deal that has gone wrong. Could be multifamily, could be one of your flips. What happened? What went wrong? And then what did you learn from it?
Yeah, so I'll probably do one of the larger projects just because I think they have the ability to go wrong because they're so large. There's just more moving pieces. I mean, to date, we've done a few hundred transactions. So keep this in mind when I say, this one went wrong, because it's not really dead until it's sold and you do a case study on it, So, but we have a 129 unit property in Connersville, Indiana, and we bought it just about 2.5 years ago. Really great cost basis, okay market, kind of tertiary, small town, lower income. But, cost basis was great. And we had a plan just to go in, put about $600,000 in this building, get it humming, get operations well, and then refinance and keep it for the long term. But after our due diligence period and after we closed, we started getting into this property, and there is Band-Aids everywhere that are starting to come undone. So a couple quick examples were the bathtubs we thought were being reglazed and part of a condition of closing. They were covering up cracks and then put these I call them old lady slip pads. My grandma had them in the bathtub. There's little nubs on them, so you wouldn't slip in the bathtub. So it looked, and there's a lot of older people that live there. So we were like, oh, that kind of makes sense. They were actually covering the crack. So they would redo the bathtubs, epoxy them, and then they would put those on top of the crack to help it ensure that we wouldn't essentially see it. So that happened. So 3 stories, right? So if anytime a person was 180 pounds, in the middle, it would crack and water goes down, right? 3 stories.
Right.
And so we had a ton of significant issues on water damage through this process, because we were also only about 60% occupied at the time. So this was a true heavy lift. And so a person above, some would be leaking into a vacant unit. And then you wouldn't discover it for 4 or 5 days sometimes, because some of it's little water and then little water and then little water. Next thing you know, it goes in the hallway and you're discovering this stuff. So we made a determination to go and rip out every tub and put in new surrounds and new plumbing fittings and things like that. So that project alone was $350,000.
Jeez.
So by the time you did them all, so we did 129 of those, actually a little bit more than that. Then the exterior of the building was wood siding, old wood siding that was, pretty common for the 70s, right? And they had decks attached to it, 3-story decks. And behind the decks, the flashing wasn't done correctly. Again, you can't really see it, right? But water's seeping behind the wood decking. What does water do with wood? Creates termites, causes damage and erosion. We ended up having to rip off all the decks in the entire siding of this 129 unit building, re-sided all, new soffit. That was almost a $900,000 project, and that doesn't get us to unit renovation yet. So our $600,000 budget turned into $2 million. So it was incredibly stressful. We just got it to 96.9% occupied, and there was a fire Sunday. So
man, this is the fire.
So it was brutal.
So it's been an uphill battle this whole time with this.
Yeah, we're just in there. We're just fighting. It feels like a heavyweight match. We're just battling. And so we have some displaced tenants. Sadly, a tenant passed away, accidental fire in his unit, potentially caused by smoking or a device of his, which is sad. Fortunately, no one else was hurt. So we have about 6 more weeks to get the restoration now done, get these tenants back in and get it back to stabilized again. But it definitely feels 3 or 4 steps forward and then 6 steps backwards on this thing. But, back to some of our original points, our business plan did not go as planned, clearly. We did not expect the expenses, and we undershot our normal expenses as a whole. So we have options. I think that's kind of the beauty of real estate. And if you can take this away is, if we went and sold this for $67 a door, in today's market, that's still a pretty low cost entry for somebody else coming into a pretty stabilized product. Our investors would make 12, almost 13% annualized return.
Even after.
So even after all of this that we've been through, and I injected a lot of my own personal capital to bridge this gap. So there's no one who wants more success than I do. But because we didn't push on the deal more or overpay for the deal, we had a lot of basis. And I think that's really important. But it has been a painful thing. But I think it also, for a future case study, you guys know this, every investor who invests with you wants to know past history. If you can go hey, this is the worst thing we've ever done. Here's why. Here's what we learned. And we kick back an 8% annualized return, which is better than the S&P 500. You can be kind of proud of saying that. So it's been a headache. It's been terrible. I'm not going to lie to anybody on this podcast. It's been terrible, but there's light at the end of the tunnel. And again, fortunately, we have a great operational team to finish this thing up.
So, I mean, even despite all the extra expenses, over doubling now, you said you have like $2 million maybe into that rehab at this point. Are you guys cash flowing still, or is it kind of more of a break even at this point, or,
Yeah, we're probably break even at this point. We would be turning the tide though at cash flow right now. This would have been the April 1st would have kind of been our leap into cash flow positive and things like that. So we're either going to disposition it because we have so much capital tied into it to get it back out. Refinance isn't really an option because you're going to get 70-75% loan to value. So that gap is what we need. So we're either going to just sell it outright, or we're thinking about starting a second LLC because we've done all the heavy lifting and maybe rebuying that property essentially from ourselves with new capital. So again, the beauty of real estate, if there's a will, there's a way. And if you're relatively pretty good at operations, you can probably come out the other side well.
Man, I appreciate A, the transparency, and B, I think sometimes we're all a little shy to maybe be transparent about some of the mistakes or the bumps along the road. But anybody who's seasoned as an investor, those are the guys that you can't pull the wool over. And so if you're like a younger, or you're in the game but you haven't been doing it a long time, you try in and like posture or flex on somebody, they just sniff that out. Because it's not a matter of like if something goes wrong, it's when something goes wrong. And then what they really want to see is how did you handle it when it did go wrong.
Yeah.
And
it'll be interesting too, just to see what happens with your insurance on that property. If will they drop you? Will it just go up a lot? Or you know what I mean? It's just going to be interesting. It seems like some insurance companies have been quick once something happens to the property to drop you. Yep, they walk away from it. So.
Yeah, that's our biggest concern too. And that's also why maybe starting a second LLC and buying it, because of ownership will transfer and then go to a new insurance agency is probably probably one of our good options there because of what you just said. But, it's funny, you guys are dead on. If we came on here and talked about a couple big agency refinances and the home runs we hit, like that goes on deaf ears in my opinion. Like those are great. I'll tell you guys all about those, but I think most investors want to hear about the shit shows because it's what you're made of.
Well, the great thing is you could sell it today and your investors would still make money. So that's like a good spot to be at the end of the day, as stressful as that is. So great job on you guys sticking with that and through blood, sweat, and tears, continuing to reposition this property. And hopefully you kind of have a good ending here if you guys figure out a way forward. So
let's go into what we call our Lil Nugget. So Ross, you have been giving us a lot of really good information. Give us something we haven't touched on yet. Maybe it's more personal to kind of how you operate your business or your life that somebody listening to this show could apply to their business.
Yeah, so I mean, I have a few, but I think the one that I haven't talked as much about is how important the people around you are. You guys, because we kind of touched on Stan and James, I think it makes sense to kind of bring this back full circle. So you guys got to meet Stan. I think Stan, you even asked Stan a little bit about surrounding yourself with the right people and how that helps you. Like Stan and I, even though we're like really good buddies, our personalities are actually very different. So I would joke, like I'm kind of the face of this organization, but Stan's the backbone. So Stan is good at the things that I'm not good on, like the very detailed, like project management, very detailed reading contracts, pulling out the things that are like, oh, we got to worry about this. Let's push back on that. That's him. I'm like sales, acquisitions, rehab. James is everything business oriented and he has no emotion. And so I'm like super emotional and he's like the opposite. He's like black and white. And he cuts through all the BS. So I think no matter what you do, if you're going to start a business, you're eventually going to have to rely on other people. Yeah. And picking the right people that not only you get along with, so they got to be a good human, but truly have a skill set that is different from yours So there's a saying that we kind of make fun of in our household a little bit: 1+1 = 3. When you can add somebody to your team that makes the whole better, that's how you really scale a business. Because there's a long time when you first start a business, you're going to bootstrap it and do everything yourself. You have to, just part of business. The first person you hire or you bring into your organization has to be somebody who makes the whole double, essentially, or triple in the output, because they are so good at those few things that you're bad.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that is good.
Hey, in the last 12 months or since we last talked, what's been one of the biggest resources? Could be a book, could be a seminar, class, conference you went to, something tactical that helped you in your business development.
So I think I told you guys this a few times off air. Like, I'm terrible at networking, like going to any conferences, or I'm not a big reader. Like, Seth, you're talking about all these books you're reading. I'm like, oh my god, I'm like, shame, terrible. I don't actually listen to a lot of real estate stuff anymore, so I've really switched to mindset stuff.
Yeah.
And this book is really hot. My wife actually pushed me into it, so I'm just going to kind of mention it. But that book from Mel Robbins, Let Them. I don't know if you guys have read that yet.
I haven't read it yet, but I've seen it all over the place online.
Oh my gosh, dude, it's everywhere. Everybody, and she has a podcast too. So if you guys want like something easy while you're running, like good mindset stuff. But I've really gravitated to that because I feel like the more I listen to mindset, like way to look at life type of material and content, it kind of settles me, I guess, for lack of a better word. So we talked about emotional intelligence earlier. Like, the more I think and put things into context, and a lot of times, like, it takes a podcast or someone talking about a subject to do that. But that's really helped me hone in my emotions to help us grow our business. So I've switched from like operational content to more like mindset stuff. And that one's been really good. I would give that a listen to.
That's good. Very practical. How can people find out more about you and follow your success?
So Follow Deal, our website, first and foremost. But the other one, honestly, is LinkedIn. That's probably the number one. Seth, I know we go back and forth, and Garrett, we go back and forth a decent amount on LinkedIn. Like, that's probably my number one thing. Engage with me there. I get a ton of spam, so I apologize if you send me a DM, like, be like, hey, I'm a real human. I heard you on Reinvest with Seth and Garrett. Like, let me know. But those are definitely the best places.
Isn't it crazy how many people pop in your LinkedIn like, hey, do you want to get digital coffee? I'm like, okay, I just already know. I don't. It's like an auto message. When you say that, I just already know. So it is kind of funny how spammy it felt like it's gotten, even in the last 2 years. Like, I feel like when I first started, it was not as bad as it is now. So
it's all pay to play, man. Ross, thank you so much. I know we went a little longer. We said we weren't going to do this, and then we also knew we were going to do it. And it's because you're easy to talk to, dadgummit.
Yeah, guys, we said when we started this, we're like, all right, let's shoot for 30. Let's get it done in 40. Here we are at 53.
It's wild how 30 minutes fly, though, to be fair.
It's a good time.
but you've got a lot of experience, and it's easy to talk hypothetical, but we talked about a lot of real life investing experience, and that is invaluable. So thank you for coming on today.
Good chatting with you guys. Thanks again.
As always, excited that you joined us for another episode of the Reinvest Podcast. If you want to learn how you can use your hard-earned capital to diversify into real estate, go to our website, reinvestcapital.us, and shoot us a message. Move farther, reach higher, and grow deeper.